What's going on? Welcome to Tech with Sean, and today we're checking out the brand new 2022 version of the Zephyrus M16. This is the new 16-inch gaming laptop in their ROG lineup, and let's run through the specs real quick. It's got the i9-12900H, and that has 6 performance cores and 8 E-cores for a total of 14 cores and 20 threads, so it's a really beefy chip to have in a laptop. For the memory, this unit has 16 gigabytes of DDR5, and this has been a point of some contention, as on the Best Buy Q&A for the product page, an ASUS rep on there mistakenly said that it was a 16 gigabyte soldered and an open DIMM. And so that angered some people who ordered it. You know, they wanted to be able to put in another stick that was, I guess, bigger, so they'd have 16 gig soldered and then add a 16 gig stick for 32 total. This one from Best Buy at least definitely has 8 gigabytes soldered and an 8 gigabyte removable DIMM. Now going into CPU-Z and looking at it, it reports as quad channel memory. Now I've never had a DDR5 laptop, so I don't know if that's normal and each stick is running dual channel itself, but it's reporting as quad channel DDR5 4800, so take that for what it's worth. The GPU in here is the new RTX 3070 Ti mobile version, and it has 8 gigabytes of GDDR6, and this unit has Hynix memory. And it's a pretty good performer. We have a base wattage of 100 watts, and then in the turbo mode it can dynamically boost up to 120 watts, which that's pretty decent for something this thin. It's using basically the same chassis as the Zephyrus G15 from last year, and so with that you get the same 6-speaker setup, and it sounds really good for a gaming laptop. I haven't noticed any speaker popping or clicking or anything like I did with the G15 at launch. That has since been corrected in a BIOS update on the G15, so I'm guessing whatever fixes they did for that, they just went ahead and preemptively put into this M16. The screen is a really standout feature on this unit. This is a 16:10 aspect ratio, 500 nits running at 2560 by 1600. Now the screen does have some sort of adaptive sync, but it doesn't have G-Sync even if you put this into discrete GPU mode. Again, since this is using basically the same chassis as the G15, you have the same really nice trackpad. It's a glass precision trackpad. The keyboard is really nice. It's one of my favorite laptop keyboards to type on, I would say. It's only a single zone RGB, but this one does have some RGB. This also has a little bit of a soft touch finish on there. It does, help it feel a little softer than if it were just metal. I don't know if it's necessarily better or worse. It does, though, seem like it will get dirty a little faster, so you might want to keep that in mind. ASUS has added mux switches to basically all of their 2022 gaming laptops, I believe, so on this one you can go into Armory Crate and set it to run in discrete GPU mode, and that's going to get you the best gaming performance. Speaking of gaming performance, this is a gaming laptop, right? So let's jump into some benchmarks and some games and see what it can really do. We'll start off here with 3D Mark TimeSpy to just get a general idea of the performance that we can expect from this machine. And on the default turbo profile, we got 10,900 on TimeSpy for the combined score. Now that's a really good score for a 3070, so this 3070 Ti is definitely a little bit of a step up. Then with a little slight overclock, I believe I did plus 75 on the core and afterburner. That was enough to push us over 11,000 here on the M16. Next we have Forza Horizon 5, and I'm running the benchmark here at 1600p on the ultra quality preset, and it did a pretty good job. We kept us up over 60 frames per second for sure. And as we finish the benchmark here in the results, you'll see that this M16 was able to manage an average of 75 frames per second. So that's going to be a nice smooth gaming experience, and if you needed some more frames, you could just turn a couple of settings down. Next is Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and this is a really heavy benchmark to run. This is on the very high preset and at 1600p again. And you'll see that it struggled there in the beginning to stay above 60 frames per second. And really, I haven't seen any laptop that can really crush this benchmark. And this averaged 67 frames per second, but we did have multiple dips below 60. So during the gameplay, You may have to play around with some settings, but it's going to do a good enough job. Next up, we got GTA 5. This is an older game, but it's still really popular. And here we have most of the settings maxed out, running at 1600p. I do have the anti-aliasing on MSAA2X, but most of the other stuff is on the highest settings. And this kept well above 60 frames per second. This would of course be a good experience on this machine. But if GTA 5 is your game, or you just want to play some, this M16 is going to knock it out of the park, and it's going to feel really good to play it on here. Next game, still from Rockstar, we got Red Dead Redemption 2, and here I'm scrolling through the settings. I'm running most stuff on high. This is at 1600p, and yeah, jumping into the benchmark again, we're over 60 frames per second. Here we got more like 80 frames per second. It's going to be a little lower once we get out into the city, but this did a bang up job in this game. You know, a lot of systems struggle here running this San Denis area on higher settings and higher resolutions, but this kept up really no problem. And if it can run the San Denis area of this game this well, then you can expect an even higher frame rate when you're out in most of the game, which is more rural and sparsely populated. And the final tally here, you can see our average was 69 frames per second, nice. But a little less nice, jumping into Armory Crate, you can see it's saying we're up over 50 decibels, and I will tell you the fan was absolutely screaming running this game. Next up, we got a much lighter, more esportsy game. This is Strange Brigade, and we're running this at 1600p on the Ultra preset for the graphics. And the combination of this 3070 Ti and the Alder Lake i9 are delivering a really buttery frame rate for something like this. Even when there's a lot of models and things on screen, it's keeping the action nice and high. And you can see our average was over 130 frames per second, even at 1600p Ultra. The Cyberpunk 1.5 patch just came out, and with that we got an official benchmark, so here I am running it. And so at 1200p RT medium DLSS balanced, we got a 60-ish frames per second in the benchmark. It did dip below it a little bit, it did go above it a little bit, but this was generally 60 frames per second, I would say. Here on the results page, it says our average was 64 frames per second. So you could always tweak the settings a little bit either way, depending on what you wanted to get. And finally, let's jump into a bot match here on Halo. And you can see here, we're well above 60, more like the 70 to 80 range a lot of times. And this was a definitely playable experience. This was on 1600p on the high preset, so you could either use some resolution scaling, drop some settings, drop the resolution or something if you needed more frames, but I would say this is totally playable on 1600p high. Alright, well you can see from that this is pretty much a beast when it comes to actually running the games. You're going to get good frame rates with that Alder Lake CPU, and the 3070 Ti, that's a pretty nice chip, and going up to 120 watts, you're going to be able to play pretty much any game you want to on this thing. Like with anything, there are going to be some pros and cons to it though, so let's run through those. I would say on the pros, you have the look and the portability of it. You know, it's just a really nice, sleek looking machine. It does have those little dots on it, but overall it's a lot more minimal and maybe professional looking than a lot of other gaming laptops. And it's pretty light for considering the hardware that it has inside. So I would say if you're looking for something portable, that this is going to be a good choice, and that's, you know, definitely one of the selling features and why you'd pick this over a thicker gaming laptop with higher wattage GPU and stuff. One area I think where this really stands out is the sheer audio-visual experience that you get when gaming. This 500 nit IPS high-resolution screen combined with the 6-speaker setup, if you're sitting down to play a game in front of it without a headset, without an external monitor, this is just delivering a better experience than a lot of other laptops will in a lot of different ways. You know, you're usually not going to have a screen that nice, it's not going to sound that good, and you know, the audio and visual parts for playing video games, that's like huge components. That's the whole experience basically. So that is some place where spending more on a nicer laptop like this is going to get you a better experience than something that's the best bang for the buck. Another pro is just the general build quality in the chassis. You know, you have that nice keyboard trackpad. The chassis is pretty rigid, but it's also light and portable. it's, as far as laptops go, it's pretty nice. Also, just the sheer gaming performance, when you're getting basically a top tier CPU like this, the i9, it has 14 cores and 20 threads. You're getting an RTX 3070 Ti. You know, that's high performance laptop, and this is going to be able to play pretty much anything you want for probably years to come. Okay, and while those were the pros, there's unfortunately also some big cons with this laptop that I have to go over. And my biggest and most major gripe with this thing is the fans. Oh my god, the fan noise is so loud on this laptop. It's much louder than the G15. I'm not sure if it's because of the new GPU, the added wattage, the Alder Lake chip, but this thing ramps way up on the fans on turbo mode. And if you want to use all of the wattage of the GPU, you're basically going to have to be on turbo mode because the other profiles limit the wattage of the GPU. Normally I could deal with loud fans on turbo because I would set a manual profile, but unfortunately the manual mode on here is absolutely broken when it comes to the GPU fan speed. They've added a new slider called GPU target temperature, and from what I can tell, it now just absolutely ignores the fan curve and just goes to this target temperature slider. I have my fans set to ramp way up and they don't spin up under load. It basically just throttles down the GPU clock to reach whatever target temperature you have, and it kind of sucks because I know on the G15 you can get it running pretty cool and quiet with the manual curve and keeping the GPU in the 70s and keeping the clocks up over 1500 megahertz. But on this, say you set the GPU target temp to 80, it won't kick up the fans at all basically. It will let the temperature rise up to 80 degrees and then just start throttling back the GPU speed all the way to under 1000 megahertz. So I was pretty disappointed with that. Not only does it not give you good temperatures in manual mode, it gives you low GPU clocks and low game performance. And typically on these ASUS laptops, I run manual mode all the time because, I can get the exact balance of thermals and noise that I want. So that's really disappointing and probably my biggest con with this laptop. Another con, this is only specific to this unit, I think, but it does have some significant backlight bleed in the bottom corner and along the bottom edge. This is a pretty bright screen. It goes up to 500 nits, so I'm not sure if having a really bright screen is going to make it more susceptible to backlight bleed. And I also don't know if this is a widespread issue. All I can say is that this particular unit does have some pretty noticeable backlight bleed. One other downside, this is tied to the Alder Lake CPU, and while it is the most powerful mobile CPU right now, the i9, it also can't compete with the battery life that Ryzen delivers. So you are going to get a little better scores on here, but you're going to do that at the trade-off of hours of battery life. So if you really use your laptop unplugged a lot, I would say maybe still steer towards a Ryzen laptop. But if you're plugging it in all the time and you want to play games and get the maximum performance, then you want to maybe look at the Alder Lake. And one other kind of con is that while this does have some kind of adaptive sync that they advertise, I can't really find a lot of information on it and what range of frame rates it supports and stuff. This doesn't have any G-Sync even in discrete GPU mode, and I just think at this price point that should be included because it would be nice to be able to go into those G-Sync options and set it and make sure that it's going to work whether you're running borderless full screen or use some of the G-Sync monitoring that some people use, the little indicator that tells you if it's really working or not. So it's not a deal breaker, and it still does have some variable refresh rate support, but I just think at this premium price, you should get G-Sync. But overall, this is a powerful, nice looking laptop, and if you get one and you can deal with the fan noise, I think you're going to be pretty happy with it. It delivers some killer frame rates, it looks and sounds really nice, and it's just a shame that you can't tame those fans down to really enjoy the speakers and stuff when you're gaming. I would say if you have some games that you can get by playing on like silent mode with the lower GPU wattage, then you could probably get by without headphones, but when I was running the benchmarks, I will say I literally got a headache from the fan noise. I had to take Excedrin. It was so loud. I was sitting in my office and running just hours of benchmarks and stuff, and I just can't believe that they broke the manual mode like that. I think, honestly, if I was them, I would update Armory Crate and just totally remove the GPU target temp slider and just go back to letting the fan curve adjust the temperatures, not, downclocking the GPU. That is something that could get updated, in which case that would greatly affect my impressions of this laptop, because if my biggest cons are the manual mode being broken and the fan noise, fixing the manual mode could fix both of those problems. So they haven't always had the best support, and I can't guarantee that they're going to update it. So as of now, that's my impressions. This thing, it runs kind of hot, kind of loud, but it is really powerful. And that's just kind of the trade-off that you have to make when you're picking out a gaming laptop. Sorry, I can't tell you. There's no perfect answer one way or the other, but maybe if you're on the fence, wait and see what the new G15 is like, because I have a feeling that it's going to run a little cooler with the Ryzen processor. My only concern is that if they broke the manual mode on all of their 2022 laptops, that will be really sad. I just can't believe how it downclocks the GPU so far instead of using the fan curve that you set. It's kind of mind-blowing. So that's my review for now. I hope you liked it. I hope it was somewhat entertaining. Hit that like button if you did. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll see you in the next video. Oh, and make sure you're subscribed, because I'm also going to do a video with a side-by-side comparison of this M16 and the 2021 G15 with the 3070.